authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation. Welcome to Tanisha Talks Tea, where we dive into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift YouTube, we are back up on a Monday afternoon, as I promised. Hi, sippers. Tanisha Talks Teas back in on this Monday afternoon. So, as y'all read the title, Diddy, the jurors are deliberating his fate. What say the public? What say the news? What say you who's? What say the sippers? Okay, let's start off by giving a shout out to the platforms that we are streaming on. We are streaming on YouTube. Hi, sippers on YouTube. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sipping tea with Tanisha Talks Teas. Remember to like and subscribe and drop your teacups in the chat. We are on Facebook. Hi, Facebook. Thank you for following and sipping tea. We're on Twitch and Kick as well. We're doing good on all streaming platforms. You can find Tanisha Talks Teas. So let's get right into it, y'all. Diddy, as y'all know, his trial has come to an end, but how will it end for Diddy? We are all like just hanging in the wings to see, right, what it's going to be for Diddy. Nobody knows the trouble Diddy woes as of yet. It may definitely potentially be some serious numbers. It could be single digits, or it could be football numbers. We don't know yet. Okay, so we're just really looking to see, right? Okay, I'm trying to share my stream. I don't know what the hell's going on. Okay, so yeah, let's get on into the things of Diddy. Diddy was arrested back in like last September, October or some shit. Caught at the hotel in New York with ketamine or something substance on him. Diddy has been brought up on lots of charges for RICO, trafficking, delivering prostitutes across state lines, trafficking, drugs across state lines and things like that. Like it's been a mess for Diddy. Diddy has been under lots and lots of scrutiny. So let's see on Monday, June 30th of 2025, where and what, is going on with Diddy.
The trial against Sean Diddy Combs reconvenes today as the jury begins its deliberations.
That's right. Good days, Briella Tomasetti. She has been following this story, this trial, better yet, since week one. She has the details from outside Manhattan Federal Courthouse with more. Briella, good morning.
Tashani and Tina, yeah, a very big day, a big week ahead for those 8 men and 4 women on that 12-member jury. Good morning again to both of you. Prosecutors presenting their closing arguments on Thursday. The defense presented theirs on Friday, and now today those deliberations begin. But let's get to the charges that Sean Diddy Combs is facing, because the federal government has charged him with 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, which carries a max sentence of life in prison, 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, which each carry a minimum 15-year prison sentence, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, which each carry a max sentence of 10 years in prison. Prosecutors allege Diddy used power, violence, and fear to get what he wanted, and say he believed his fame put him above the law. On Friday, defense attorney Mark Agnifilo countered their argument, telling the jury his client is not guilty of sex trafficking, but instead engaged in a consensual swingers lifestyle. He pointed out that Diddy is a self-made successful entrepreneur and put a spotlight on his family's presence in the courtroom. Agnifilo acknowledged that his client could be violent, but said that does not equate to federal crimes. He also noted that some of Diddy's accusers have sued him in civil court. The rapper's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, settled her lawsuit against him for $20 million. When addressing the transportation to engage in prostitution charges, Agnifilo repeated the defense's stance that Diddy paid male escorts for their time, not sex. And in regard to the racketeering charges, he said there's a gaping lack of evidence. Legal analyst Mackenzie Joy believes the RICO charge will be the hardest one to prove, because the jury must find that Diddy and his inner circle committed at least 2 crimes.
It's going to be interesting to see if the jury can can see the connection with the employees of Combs's business, which is obviously a vital element of that crime. You know, his assistants did testify to securing drugs and whatnot, but then they did end up having to lop off two of the potential predicate crimes right before going to closing statements.
The judge told the jury to return to this courthouse before 9 o'clock this morning so that he can issue them instructions. Then the 12-member panel will head behind closed doors to deliberate, and they will have to sift through 7 long weeks of graphic and emotional testimony as they consider a verdict. For now, that's the latest live here in Lower Manhattan. Tina and Tashani, back to you.
Briella.
All right. So, like I said, they're wrapping up, right, on Diddy's trial. Diddy's trial lasted 2 months. I mean, there was so much to unpack, y'all. I'm so surprised that it only lasted 2 months. But nobody came in for Diddy. Like, Diddy did not testify, and no one came in for Diddy. Okay. It was just a lot. So, you know, they heard a lot of testimony and stuff. I'm still on the fence about.
Hi, I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. It has all come down to this. The fate of Sean Combs is now in the hands of 12 jurors. Combs's defense team presented their closing arguments today, asking jurors to have the courage to acquit Sean Combs and to, quote, return him to his family. The defense attorney telling jurors this trial isn't about sex trafficking, racketeering, or transportation to engage in prostitution. Instead saying, quote, domestic violence is the issue. We own it. That's not charged. The defense also attempting to sway jurors into seeing Combs's ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, as a willing participant in his swingers lifestyle, calling their relationship, quote, a great modern love story. Jury deliberations are set to begin Monday. The rap mogul has pleaded not guilty to all charges. If convicted, he could face up to life in prison. Let's get right to Chief Investigative Correspondent Aaron Katersky, who has been inside the courtroom throughout this trial. And Aaron, the defense wrapped today. How long did their closing arguments take?
About 4 hours. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo in that time, Eva, sought to convince the jury of the times when Cassie Ventura had agency in her relationship with Sean Combs. She wasn't clutching her pearls, Agnifilo told the jury. She chose the kind of lifestyle also that Sean Combs was into.
The defense asked the jury to see the case as a, quote, great modern love story. Can you please explain this moment to us?
It was a moment where the defense really tried to reframe everything the jury had heard about the relationship between Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs. He urged them to read all of the text messages they sent each other. He said it would make you cry. Some of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. And he said it was true love. It was a great modern love story. Perhaps whitewashing the fact that he beat her, as prosecutors later pointed out in rebuttal, throughout the years of their relationship.
Now, Combs has been in this courtroom for over a month now, Aaron. His family and friends often attending there in support. Who was there with him today?
All of the kids, they just left, as a matter of fact. His mother was there. He gestured to them on the way in, and he hugged his defense attorney, Mark Agnifilo, after he finished delivering the closing statement. This was the last chance that Combs will have to try and convince the jury to find him not guilty, and the defense asked jurors to summon the courage to acquit Sean Combs. Defense attorney Agnifilo said the government targeted him with evidence that could not support the charges.
So, Aaron, what's next in this case?
The jury is done for the weekend. They're going to be back on Monday morning. They'll hear the judge's instructions and begin deliberating the charges that could put Sean Combs in prison for life if he's convicted, something the defense was desperately trying to avoid with their arguments today.
Aaron Katersky for us there at the courthouse. Looks very busy behind you. Thank you so much. And now ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer is joining me to discuss the impact of these closing arguments prior to deliberation. Brian, how did the defense close their arguments here?
So it's very interesting. We started off with a quote from actually one of Cassie's posts on Instagram that's still on her Instagram page now, and talked about domestic violence is the issue, saying that this was about domestic violence, a theme that the defense has brought up from the beginning of this trial, and it was not about sex trafficking. Trying to reframe that Sean Combs, just like Teddy Garrigo said in the opening statements, is a flawed man, an indefensible man, but the allegations in which he's being accused of are not things that he's done.
Can you tell us more about the attorney who presented today's closing argument?
Mark Agnifilo is the lead attorney in this case. You might have seen him in the Nexium case as well. He's well known throughout the Southern District of New York and in federal court cases. He did the closing arguments here. And if Agnifilo makes or sounds familiar to you, Karen Agnifilo, his wife, representing Luigi Mangione, but we'll kind of move on from that. He gave the arguments here to end the trial.
Okay, so the federal prosecutors have argued that the video of Combs dragging Ventura is sort of it's the linchpin moment of this case, right? The defense had a really different spin on this today.
So interestingly enough, even if you look at Jane Rosenberg, she is the sketch artist here writing about this. Sean Combs has a cell phone in his hand, and what the defense is arguing here is that this is about getting a cell phone, whether it be Cassie or Sean Combs' back, and that when he had the opportunity to get the phone, he took it and left, even reframing the idea that he didn't throw the vase at Cassie, instead throwing of the vase, the flowers, still a bad thing, and the vase fell at his feet. And it wasn't that he was trying to drag her back to a freak off. In fact, when Israel Flores came up, one of the security guards, he's saying that he can see Cassie saying, get back to the room, get back to the room. Agnifilo making the argument that there was no danger back in the room, there was no freak off in the room. This was about jealousy, this was about that phone.
Okay, what did the defense attorney want these jurors to take away from everything that they heard?
So, all of the predicate acts, right? He didn't kidnap anyone. He didn't obstruct justice. He didn't bribe anyone. Each and every time giving a piece of evidence and giving his rendition, his version of why this wasn't a racketeering conspiracy, why these were not predicate acts, ultimately walking through each and every charge and explaining about the lack of credibility of some of the witnesses, how they might have exaggerated or lied in the opinion of the defense, or that the elements of the crime were not made out because it just doesn't make sense that Sean was not part of a criminal enterprise, but instead a self-made billionaire.
Brian, thank you so much for being with us. With closing arguments wrapped, the case will now go to the jury on Monday. What will happen inside the closed doors of that deliberation room? Here to give us some insight into the process is Eric Rudick, a senior litigation consultant. And Eric, you're not involved in this case, but you are an expert on jury behavior. Sean Combs isn't just any defendant. He's a major celebrity. So does that typically come into play with a jury?
Yes, absolutely. So regardless of the criminal case, the jury understands the gravity of their decision and that they ultimately are deciding the fate of an individual. But especially in this case, with all the media attention, all the people in the courtroom, and their familiarity with Sean Combs, they're certainly even more attuned to the importance of their decision, and they're going to weigh the evidence and I believe, to consider all the evidence and decide the case accordingly.
What do you expect those first minutes of deliberation will be like for the jury?
So these are the only 12 people in the world that haven't been able to watch any news about the trial or even speak to each other. So, and after almost 2 months of very emotional testimony, it's going to be very cathartic. They want to talk about the case, talk about moments in the trial. So before they even start to consider the verdict questions, I feel, based on my experience in talking to jurors after trials, they're going to spend the next first 1 or 2 hours just getting everything off their chest before they start to really deliberate and decide each of the charges against Sean Combs.
Now, no cameras were allowed inside the courtroom during this trial, but the national media and even some high-profile people were in that courtroom. Is that something that jurors would typically be impacted by in any way?
Certainly, regardless of the trial, but especially in a case like this, their familiarity with celebrities and, they're liking them and having those folks support Sean Combs can certainly impact them. But ultimately, they've heard 2 months of testimony, and I think all of that's going to be go into the background when they speak to each other and ultimately look at the evidence that they heard in the 2 months, consider what the prosecution and defense, how they wrapped up the case in terms of their closing arguments, and you really deliberate and decide the case. And I think all that will not be as important once they start to deliberate.
The gravity of this for this jury, you mentioned that earlier, determining someone's fate. What kind of evidence typically does well with juries? What typically does not?
So jurors do not like circumstantial evidence. They want to see direct proof, especially if they're if the burden is beyond a reasonable doubt, which it is here in any criminal trial. So they want to see the physical evidence, and they also want to see evidence that corroborates other witnesses' testimony. So that's going to be very important in how they weigh the decision. The videos, all of the corroborating testimony is, I believe, going to be very important for their ultimate decisions in this case.
Eric, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your insight.
Sure.
Still ahead, closing arguments in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. The defense trying to convince the jury their client is not a sex trafficker. Were they convincing? Our legal experts weigh in. That's next. Welcome back. The jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trial set to start deliberating Monday. Today, the defense delivered a closing argument that was at times theatrical. Let's break down the strengths and weaknesses of their closing. ABC News legal contributors Brian Buckmeyer and Bernardo Villalona are here. Brian, the defense had some colorful statements today, including, I just want to read a few of them. Boxes of Astroglide, take him off the streets, referring to the lubricant that was found in Combs's garage. And when talking about Cassie Ventura, he said this: she's a woman who actually likes sex. Good for her. She's beautiful. Brian?
Not the way that I would have done it. Stylistically, I think not the best way to do it. But I think for Mark Agnifilo, the way he's coming across is someone that is explaining a case as if you were sitting in a bar. And I think for the important part of this is, what did those 12 people think about it? I did not like it. I know many of us that in the audience didn't like it, especially calling this a modern day love story. He beat that woman relentlessly. You saw it on a video. That's no love story that I've ever read or known about, but it seemed like in the points that he was making in terms of why certain evidence didn't connect to the crimes, the jurors were engaged. I think they liked his personality. It came off more authentic than what we saw from the government of just reading and telling the elements and walking bit by bit. So yeah, he swung for the fences, missed a lot, but he made some connections in other parts.
Bernardo, I see you furrowing your brow over there.
So from the prosecution standpoint, looking at the closing argument of Mark Agnifilo, I mean, he made a joke out of the whole court system. He made a joke out of the whole closing arguments. It was like a complete mockery of the government's case and of the closing. And I think that may backfire on him because literally for the first hour or so, it felt like I was sitting in a comedy show. And that's hard. You know, some cases you can make it, you know, a little bit of laughter, stuff like that. But when you have video of a woman getting beaten, brutally beaten, and when you have text messages that actually corroborate in a sense of the feelings of what these women went through, and when you know when some of the testimony is that escort urinated in Cassie's mouth, pretty much waterboarding her and having to have sex or with a UTI or on her period. So there is testimony that is just so gruesome, and for you to make a whole mockery of it, I think it may backfire on him. Yes, he did the most that he could in terms of arguing the predicate acts, why it's not predicate acts and why there's no racketeering conspiracy, but he also lost credibility on another point, which is having to deal with the Mann Act, transportation to engage in prostitution, because for him to say that Sean Combs was paying for time, quality time, not for sex, I think he lost credibility with that argument, and that may have trickled down to the rest of what he was saying.
All right, strengths and weaknesses. Brian, you go first.
I think with the strength, the style of which Mark Agnifilo did, not necessarily the presentation, but the arguments that he makes. I think for him, what I saw, it took a central theme or idea that people might think be universal. One, I think that might have worked out well, and I saw some of the jurors really respond well to it, is this allegation of Cassie being raped and the text messages as to whether it happened in September or in October. And his argument was that Cassie was with Sean Combs her then ex, because she's with her now husband. And while having intercourse with him, the husband called. And he's saying, well, guys, this is a story that we all understand, that because she got caught, she has to make up a lie. And she made the biggest of lies, that she was raped. That is a concept that I think people are like, okay, why would you lie? In that sense, I kind of get it. And I think that helped him. But on other aspects where he's talking about this being a modern day love story, or some of the points that Bernardo made up, it's like, dude, like, where are we going with that? Like, stick to your strengths. Don't waver off.
Bernardo?
I have to say, I have to take it back to one of the bail applications where Justice Carter said, what does love got to do with it? You know, that's what played in my head when he was talking about this modern day love story. But also in terms of another, actually a strength of his, aside from doing the predicate acts, I think one, having to deal with the kidnapping, where he told this jury, you come here in the morning and you're not allowed to leave until the end of the day. Do you feel like you're kidnapped? So that's number one. But two, when he blew up a picture of Sean Combs, and KK is in it, and a lot of other people, we're talking about over 20 other people that are inside of that photo, and he asked this jury, what's the one thing that comes to your mind when you see this photo? You know, is it joy? Is it happiness? Is it family? Is it business? And he said, the one word that doesn't come up is racketeering conspiracy. The government wants you to think that this photo right here of Sean Combs, KK, and like 20 other people gathered is racketeering conspiracy, and this is not it. So I thought that those were two strengths in the defense closing.
The prosecution got to give a rebuttal.
Yes.
How do you think they did?
The prosecution's rebuttal, Maureen Comey came out swinging. She went head on. I mean, I think it was like a head-on collision when she came out, literally, because she was so aggressive and so passionate, but she needed to be, because she had to show her disgust for the mockery that Mark Agnifilo made of this entire closing argument and of the case in general. And she hit it point by point, everything that Mark Agnifilo had said, and also re-emphasized to this jury in the sense of, did these women want to have sex with a UTI, with a cold sore, being beaten? And we emphasize in terms of what is the conspiracy, who are the people a part of this conspiracy, and how it's a mockery and defies logic. And just to have them for quality time, it's in old messages. When he was texting, Sean Combs was texting the head of Cowboy for Angels, was like, look, here's $1,000 for that bum ass cowboy, like, because he couldn't perform, but yet he still paid the $1,000.
And to piggyback off of that, when Mark Agnifilo was doing his closing argument, AOC Comey was chomping at the bit.
Yes.
You could see her just waiting, rolling her eyes.
Yeah.
And even behind that, you saw Sean Combs' leg puttering like this.
Right, and when a defendant is acting like that, you know you're doing a good job as a prosecutor. But I also have to point out that Mark Agnifilo, because of certain statements that he made during his closing argument, the judge had to step in and give a curative instruction to the jury to be like, look, what was said, pretty much is saying, look, what was said was wrong. You are ultimately the judges of the facts. You're not to determine about this is a targeted prosecution or why specifically they were going after Sean Combs.
All right, we're out of time. I know we could talk about this for a lot longer. Bernardo, Brian, thank you both for being here with us. Coming up, YouTube star Tisa Tells is here to dish about what people are talking about with this trial. And Diddy's son teaming up with Ye on a new song. What or who's it about? We'll tell you next.
All right, so tea sippers, as we are awaiting anxiously for the jurors to deliberate on Diddy, right? It has been a very fast, 2 months flew by for the Diddy trial. And I mean, they crammed everything into 2 months. That is a very little amount of time to, federally indict Diddy. So, I mean, I have gave a lot of my prediction on what will happen to Diddy. I, know that the feds have a 99-point-something% conviction rate, and only one person ever in the history of being indicted by the feds has ever gotten off. And I think maybe Diddy might have the attorneys that have done that for somebody before. However, I don't, and I felt this way, and I believe I heard Mr. Gene Deal speak on it in the Art of Dialogues today, that his defense team is not hitting as hard for Diddy as one would think, considering every news station has been going around saying that Diddy is potentially going to receive life in prison. So, I mean, you would think that they would bring witnesses, somebody. I don't care if it's his mama to testify how Diddy was in kindergarten. Somebody to testify on the behalf for Diddy of, yes, Diddy may have these underlying, some may look at it as being a seedy underworld for Xing or whatever. However, in the city of New York and California and even Miami, a lot of seedy, X lives are going on. Like, lots of people have very seedy night lives in those particular areas of the United States. So, not for nothing, I mean, I just feel like somebody should have said something for Diddy. I could be wrong in just how, ever legally that would look, but me personally, I feel that somebody should have said something for Diddy. It just feels like Diddy's in a lake of fire by himself, drowning and burning. So we're going to continue with ABC News Live, burning approved, the case against Diddy. And why do you guys think
another busy
absolutely
day.
No one, absolutely nobody stepped up and delivered, like, or testified for Diddy? Like, absolutely nobody, buddy, said anything about Diddy, in good faith to try to bring some type of, good character witness look for Diddy. In a sense, none of that happened for him. Like that, I don't know. That's I don't know what that was.
In court today as the jury prepares to deliberate in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. YouTube star Tisa Tells is back with us. She's been at the courthouse every day since the trial started, giving her more than 500,000 subscribers the inside scoop on all the days happening. Tisa, thanks for being here. Big day.
Yes.
What have your followers been saying today?
Everybody's been going crazy. They're super proud of the way the prosecution pulled through. Mark Agnifilo got up there, Your Honor, and he did his thing, and he was really good until he went into kind of creepy, misogynistic territory, is what a lot of people thought. But the prosecution on the rebuttal really pulled it through.
So Combs' family has been in court kind of on and off again. Today, like, pretty much everyone was there. What was the vibe like in court?
The vibe was hopeful. Again, they were looking at Mark Agnifilo when he started. He came out with a bang. He is a showman. As much as I tease him, we know why Diddy spent millions on him. And when he came, they were looking at him like he was the Archangel Michael coming out with his sword of vengeance, swinging. And they were just feeling like, yes, yes, yes. And when they saw the jury nodding along, smiling, laughing with Mark Agnifilo, I think they finally saw their version of justice getting served.
The jury will start deliberating on Monday. None of us know kind of how this will go or how long it will take. What is your plan as you wait?
My plan is to be there every moment of the day. You know, the juries, I've heard a lot from the OGs at ABC, because you guys have done so much. The ABC people in the courtroom said that, jury notes get passed to the judge when the jury has questions, and you never really know when the jury's going to come out. So I'm going to be camped in there giving updates live, but really just hanging on, because I don't know, like anyone else, how made up are the minds of the jury? Do they have an idea, or is this going to be 12 angry men in the room? So I'm really excited to actually see how this plays out.
Yeah, and they have the weekend, all of them, to think about it.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to be like when this verdict comes in?
I think it's going to be pandemonium. Again, if anybody's ever watched my YouTube channel, you know where my mind stands, but there's a lot of people that really, really support Diddy, and both sides are super, super passionate. So I think it's going to be pandemonium, just because outside in the court every day there's pandemonium. So I'm sure when the verdict's read, it's going to be just like the first day, everybody around and everybody feeling passionately
Give us that color, because a lot of people haven't been down to the federal courthouse. They don't know what the scene looks like there. Explain to us what that pandemonium currently already is.
Honestly, outside, it's kind of like a carnival. People are screaming at each corner, "Free Diddy, he's innocent, you're destroying a man's legacy." Other people are screaming, "No, he's guilty." People have gotten into fights over just random strangers. When you're waiting out front in the line, even with the pandemonium, with the line sitters and the circus with that, people are just getting really amped up, heightened emotions. And for some reason, good or bad, people see themselves in Diddy. People see themselves, of course, in the victims and survivors. And it literally is just boiling over more and more and more. It's turning into pure chaos out there. So when the verdict is read, I am sure they are going to secure the front of the courthouse as best they can. But again, everything's already starting to boil up with closing arguments. So it's going to be interesting.
Tisa, thank you so much for being here with us. Always so good to have you. Time now to take a look at some of the day's top online searches surrounding this case. People clearly have questions, and we have ABC News contributor Kelly Carter joining us now from LA. She always has the answers for us. So Kelly, let's start here. People are searching new music from Diddy's son and rapper Ye. What's going on here?
Yeah, so as we know, and we knew this a while ago, that Kanye West, formerly known as Kanye West, and King Combs, Sean Combs' son, were working on new music together. And at midnight, they dropped a 7-single EP, and one song, of course, is dedicated to his father. And he talks about how no one is going to get any sleep until his dad is free. And that's something that people are searching for and trying to find context clues, but also see what they're talking about in that song.
Another question people are asking, is Cassie Ventura still making music?
Now, here's what's interesting. It's been almost 20 years since her first and only album came out from that 11-album deal that was in 2006. And at the end of last year, it was reported that she was actually hoping to release music that she had recorded all these years, but that never saw the light of day, and that she's just kind of, tweaking them a little bit and is looking for a deal and probably, maybe might release some new music. I think if ever there's a time to release some new music from her, now is probably that time.
Yeah, it's a wait and see, but maybe we'll actually see new music from her. People are also looking up Diddy Kids.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a reference to this new, King Combs album. But of course, all of the children, with the exception of one, showed up in court for these kind of closing statements from both sides. So we have seen, infrequent appearances from all of the children, but all of them, with the exception of the baby, were there in court today listening to these closing statements and these final statements.
Kelly Carter, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, so that's going to conclude ABC. Thank you. We are giving some accredited notes to ABC under the Fair Use Act. I want to point out right now that if Cassie can be redeemed from what we heard all she was privy to in the Diddy case, and the world still look forward to her contribution to whatever it is that she's doing in her life, that can be considered positive and influential on the world. I want every single one of us to never, ever give up and always follow your passion, whatever that is. I don't care how it is or what it is. Follow it and always believe that you can achieve it, okay? Because as you just heard, they are wanting new music from Cassie, however, whatever that will look like for her, coming up off of this Diddy lawsuit and trial in the public eye. They are still wanting something, from Cassie that can be fruitful in the eye of the world. Okay, so if Cassie can do it, so can we. Let's keep it moving. The jurors in the Diddy trial being instructed by the judge.
Well, it all comes down to today. After more than a month and a half of emotional and frequently graphic testimony, jury deliberations begin in Sean Combs' racketeering and sex crimes trial.
Combs opting not to testify in his own defense last week. His fate now rests with the panel of 12 jurors. In New York City and really the entire country has been watching this really intently.
Yeah, there's still a lot at play here. So let's get to Eyewitness reporter Phil Tate joining us live outside of the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Phil, what's the latest? Yeah, well, this morning the judge had charged the jury, and this as a 7-week trial had played out in a Lower Manhattan courtroom. Now a jury will have to come to some type of verdict over the next couple of hours or even days as we wait for this all to happen. Now the defense and the prosecution over the past couple of weeks have painted two separate pictures of Combs, and now a jury will have to decide whether to acquit or either to convict Combs. Now jurors will have to sift through much of the exhibit's hours-long emotional testimony that gave a glimpse to the bad boy for life daily life as salacious details were given. More than 30 prosecution witnesses had spoke, headlined by the prosecution's star witness, former Combs girlfriend Cassie Ventura, and Jane, who also had testified. Now both women said he was often violent and forced them into hundreds of sexual encounters with paid male sex workers. Now Combs chose not to testify before the close of this trial. Now Combs does maintain his innocence and has pled not guilty to several charges that he faces. But right.
All righty. Let's get into some Nancy Grace. Let's see what Nancy Grace we're talking about. But as I was saying, y'all, remember the T's in Tanisha Talks stands for to elevate and soar. Like I said, whatever you have done in your life, as long as you haven't murdered someone, we haven't heard anything about that occurring on Cassie's watch. But we have heard a lot about what other things have happened on Cassie's willing watch. Okay. And like I said, if she is someone that is sought after to continue to bear fruit in the world, okay, also to, be fruitful in life, okay, then so are all of us. So.
Breaking news tonight, we are live at the courthouse. Vegas odds even. Sean Combs will spend no time behind bars, and Sean Combs will spend life behind bars. But guess what? I don't care what the bookies say. It's all down to 12 jurors. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us.
Drop those teacups in the chat. As you get your teacup filled up, drop your teacups in the chat. I don't know what's going on my computer, y'all.
We are headed into a verdict watch.
I don't know what's going on in my computer.
Blue, the defense says we rest our case. This isn't even a trial of did he do it? It's just a trial of will he be held accountable?
He's selling his freedom as if it is a fragrance. He is out there promoting it, and I predict, Nancy, it's going to work.
Let's go straight to the courthouse. Standing by is Tisa Tell, star of Tisa Tells on YouTube. Tisa, thank you for being with us. It's my understanding that early this morning, leading into closing statements, Sean Combs looked like he was, quote, walking on air. What?
The courtroom was shocked. This man came floating in on air, twinkle toes, just dancing in two. We have never seen this man in a better mood. Everything that's happened, the attempted charges that have been dropped from the jury verdict, they have him in the best of spirits. This is a man that thinks he's going to walk away. This is a man that thinks his $20 million law team did their job. This is a man that thinks he has avoided justice.
Tisa Tells, tell me what else happened in the courtroom today.
What happened in court today literally shocked everyone. The prosecution came in strong. They made a clear, concise case. Diddy, who seemed to be walking on air, walking in, you saw his body language slump. They made such an excellent case. 2 actually map out and hold our hands like we were 3-year-olds that needed help across the street what the Combs enterprise was, how he commanded and controlled everything and everybody, and how they were nothing but an apparatus made to fulfill every sexual deviant desire he had. It really came together today in court.
At the beginning, they refer to Sean Combs, well, it's Slavic. Slavic refers to Sean Combs as the head of a criminal enterprise and someone who, quote, doesn't take no for an answer. Describe what she was telling the jury and how the jury responded. That's what Slavic said straight out of the gate.
She said he doesn't take no for an answer and he wants what he wants. When she said that, she went into a list of all the predicate crimes. She said kidnapping, arson, forced labor with sexual assault, bribery, sex trafficking, that was forced and manipulated these women. And when that happened, she went in like a battling ram and the jury was up. The jury was paying attention. They had their notepads out. They were leaned in. They were so locked in. The prosecution woke the jury up and they couldn't get enough.
Tisa tells Slavic did something I think was brilliant. She almost immediately took the jury to two of the most violent attacks on women in order to force them to perform sexually. Of course, one has to be Cassie Ventura's attack at the Intercontinental Hotel. That's the single strongest one because there's video evidence. You don't have to just take her word for it. You can see it on the closed-circuit TV there at the Intercontinental. But she also took to the jury to the moment that Jane, not her real name, was brutally attacked and covered in welts all over her body, a beating by Sean Combs, after which he told her to get back in the ring and perform oral sex on a male escort despite her protests. What did she say exactly, and how did the jury respond? What were they doing?
She showed a screenshot of the moment we saw Cassie be brutally beat. And she said, I want to take you to 2 moments, 8 years apart, but with the same pattern done by the same man. The jury was leaned in. They described how Cassie was brutally beaten and stomped. She used the word stomped. And then they tied it in with Jane. Now, of course, they didn't let us see the pictures of Jane, but they put those beaten pictures of Jane on their screens, and they showed us a screenshot of Jane's testimony where they had her saying, I was beaten, I was dragged, I was kicked. It was an incredibly powerful moment.
Tisa tells, how is Sean Combs reacting to this? What does he say as the prosecutor is regurgitating all of these horrific facts about him and he's sitting right there?
I honestly think that the jury's reaction showed us the clearest at how well the prosecution was going. When she first started talking, he almost had a smug look on his face. There was still a faint smile. He was looking over in the prosecutor's direction, in the jury's direction, looking like he did not care. However, once they put a screenshot of Cassie's that beating on, and she went through boom, 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 rapid fire of everything he's being charged with, leaving no doubt, he all of a sudden just looked straight. He looked down. Then I believe he got nudged. He looked straight again. And after that, he rarely looked at jury the whole time. But what do you do when somebody is literally outlining how you are the devil incarnate?
You know, another thing that Christy Slavic did that I thought was also brilliant, I hate when lawyers simply vomit up the letter of the law and use Latin phrases that nobody knows what they're talking about unless you went to Harvard Law School, for Pete's sake. She really broke down what RICO means, a conspiracy. And I'm going to quote what she said. The concept is simple. When someone commits a crime as part of a group, the law calls it an enterprise. And that makes them, Sean Combs, more powerful and dangerous. You know, over and over, Tisa tells, we heard the same thread going through all of the victims' testimony. when Cassie Ventura was being beaten, she looked up at all of Combs's minions and said, "Can't you see what's happening?" And they tacitly, non-verbally, condoned what Combs was doing. That's the enterprise, those people that enabled Combs. Tell me how the jury responded. What did she say, and how did they react?
That was an incredibly powerful moment, okay? Slavic said he's already a rich and powerful man, and the enterprise made him more powerful and more dangerous. When they heard that, you saw a few jurors uncross their legs and lean forward. They were dialed in. Again, it's almost like the prosecution had taken their kid gloves off and they were leaving the jurors with no doubt. You don't need to connect the dots. We are going to draw the dots, connect them for you, and then walk you over to see where everything is. Again, a lot of shifting, a lot of rubbing the faces, a lot of leaning in, taking furious notes, looking closely at what was being shown on their monitors. They had the jury with their closings.
Another important chord that Slavic struck during her closing argument, which commenced early this morning, is that Sean Combs has been clothed in respectability, in celebrity, in billions of dollars, and everything that can buy, the private jet, the mansions all over the world, the designer clothes, the fancy restaurants, people at his beck and call. But she pointed out that for all the fame, wealth, power, and privilege, he is not above the law. And he's not. Remember that quote Tisa tells, where one minion says to the other, pointing up to a picture of Combs, "This is his kingdom, and we're just living in it." Explain to me how the jury responded to her argument.
His enterprise, and the way she said the word enterprise, it was dripping with disdain. Their only goal was promoting and protecting and fulfilling every sexual desire that he had, okay? They enabled him to commit crimes. When she said that, the jury furiously taking notes, they even looked over at Sean Combs' side, not directly at him, but at the side where all his loyal supporters and family were sitting, and protecting him from law enforcement. When they said that, a few jurors' brows actually furrowed. It's almost like they were cutting through all of the BS from the last 4 weeks, cross-examinations, and cutting through to what the heart of this case was. And it became clear to everyone, I think even Sean Diddy Combs, that he is not going to beat this.
Tisa tells, what exactly did Slavic say about Sean Combs' wealth, fame, and privilege?
What she talked about was, in a failed swoop, she did an amazing job of explaining away the reason why so many of these assistants that got immunity were sitting there saying, "I think Sean Combs is a great man. He taught me so much," because she called them minions, foot soldiers, young, naive kids that were willing to do anything to be part of the organization. But she pointed out, Brendan Paul got paid $100K to do these illegal things for him. And Christine Cornum, KK, she got paid 6 times as much. I said, wow, KK got paid over $500,000. But also in that moment, they firmly put the onus on Diddy, KK, and his security staff. And they actually said that even though the names may have changed, the core group stayed the same, and they were the enterprise. And everybody else, no matter what they said, whether they knew willingly or not, were nothing but minions and foot soldiers that carried out all of his desires.
Standing by outside the Monaghan Federal Courthouse, Tisa tells, closing arguments for the state commenced this morning, and the fallout has been spectacular. Tisa tells, I found it very interesting, and this is important, that Slavic kept referring to Sean Combs' employees, as I say, his minions, because not all of them were his employees. Some were just starstruck and willing to do whatever he wanted. But she described them as foot soldiers. And you know, You got to be a foot soldier to do what they did. Some of them going into hotel rooms after freak offs and cleaning up the bodily fluids. You know, that's a nice way of saying sweat, blood, dope, food, alcohol. I mean, it was rank. The hotels, as we've talked about many times, would charge up to $47,000 to clean a room after a freak off. That would be a minion that would do that, right? And she talked about that in closing arguments, didn't she, Tisa?
Yeah, now that was a brilliant visual display. She referred to the security as lieutenant. She named them all: Fahim, D-Rock, Uncle Paulie, Rubes, said that they were armed and ready, okay? They said, remember David James? Remember how he said he was taken at gunpoint down to go confront Suge Knight with guns flying down the hill? It was an amazing, amazing image to just say that, no, this was a real criminal organization. But it didn't stop there. They then showed the pictures of the guns and the magazines, saying there were 2 AR-15s with serial numbers filed off. There were rifles with serial numbers filed off. And then they said, listen, this was an enterprise, and KK and the security gave the orders. And then they put up this visual of 11 of all his security people, 11 men standing there looking a little bit unseemly. She said, looking unseemly and saying they called the shots. And then they went back to his workers. They said maybe he didn't know. They were young. Maybe the workers didn't know, the flunkies, the minions. Maybe they were young and naive, but they followed orders, and they were nothing but foot soldiers that followed KK and security. Say again, they put everything in focus, and a lot of people whispering, if Diddy is, I don't know, if I was KK and any jury team, I would be very, very worried right now because the government has called you out.
When, if ever, was the last time you checked your home's title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is never. So stop what you're doing and make sure you're monitoring. Now use promo code Nancy. My understanding that there is a Resurrection Victory tour, a world tour being planned for Sean Combs. What?
Exactly. If you were dumb enough to bet against the house at any time, you get what you get. Listen, the Southern District of New York did not come to play. I've been in the courtroom. They've done amazing. But these idiots that want to buy a ticket to a Resurrection reunion tour, save it. Save it. Your history. Again, there's a Resurrection tour. Man who really thought he got away with everything.
Joining me, Joshua Ritter, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, star of Courtroom Confidential on YouTube. Joshua Ritter, I never count my chickens before they hatch. I go into every closing argument as if I'm going to lose, and I argue like HELL. That's pretty bold to be going in to closing statements as if you're going to win.
Listen, you got to have confidence, right? If you don't have confidence, what else are you left with? I think you have to at least applaud that. There's, whether or not the jury agrees with all of that is to be seen, I suppose. But you're certainly not going to limp into these closing arguments feeling like the case is already settled.
Okay, in addition to a so-called Victory Resurrection tour, to Tisa Tells joining us outside the courthouse. Everybody, those of you just joining us, closing arguments going down throughout the day today in the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. I understand there's a big July the 4th party planned, and I'm not talking about behind the walls of MDC.
Diddy's team. Again, I don't know if they have smuggled that man some Tucci into jail, but Diddy's team has been convinced that he is coming home. They have convinced him that he is coming home and that they have mounted such a strong case and poke holes in the prosecution's case so much that it's not going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of deliberation. That by July 4th, this man will be home to literally kiss babies and shake hands to his loyal followers that prayed for him and brought him home. Again, it defies logic that even if you sat through these summary charts and they were long, arduous days, that any jury could get through this mountain of evidence in time, whether they decide not guilty or guilty, to have him home safely. But again, time will tell. But Diddy listen, there's a lot of probably dead pigeons in Central Park, a lot of alleged sacrifices going on. We will see. But right now, this is a man that swears he is coming home.
Let's talk about closing arguments as they are going down in the Monahan Federal Courthouse throughout today. Tisa tells who is in charge of closing arguments for the defense.
Agnifilo is in charge of closing for the defense. He has perfected oh, shucks, Your Honor, this is my first day in federal court. However, it might be effective. The male jurors around Mark's age seem to be very receptive to him. And even when he's made his arguments in court, they always respond very well. I think it was very strategic. Looking at the way the jury sees the reflection in Mark to a certain point, it's going to be interesting to see how much actually carries over. But for right now, Mark seems to be their secret weapon.
Okay, to Josh Ritter joining us, criminal defense attorney. It's not like you can pass it off like in a football game. You can just throw it to your favorite player in the middle of a run. It doesn't work like that. One attorney is in charge of closing statements. You can't pass it off like one argues for an hour and then the next argues for another hour. That's not how it works. Only one lawyer from the defense team can be chosen to give closing statements. Explain.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's not a surprise that it's Agnifilo. He's the more experienced, he's the more seasoned attorney. Listen, Diddy has paid a lot of money for this defense. He's not going to let the most crucial moment in it fall into the hands of less experienced attorneys. He's paid big money. He expects that big name. He expects the partner, the headline, the person whose name appears at the top of the letterhead to be the person giving the closing arguments. And I think Agnifilo wouldn't have it any other way either. Here's the moment to shine. This is bringing it home. If you're the Diddy team, you feel like you're now just punching it through the 1 yard line. That's going to be Agnifilo. So you're absolutely right. One attorney, one chance, and I'm not surprised that it was him.
You know, I'm very, very surprised that Agnifilo chose himself. He's the lead defense attorney. He's the one to make this decision. Chose himself after his very disturbing performance with our friend Harvey Levin regarding, what else? The baby oil. Listen.
They call them freak-offs. But, you know, back when I was a kid in the late 70s, they were called threesomes.
If these are genuinely threesomes, how do you explain 1,000 bottles of baby oil?
I don't know where the number 1,000 came.
The U.S. attorney said it.
I can't imagine it's thousands. I mean, you know, and I'm not really sure what the baby oil has to do with anything.
They're essentially saying it's a lubricant for an orgy.
I guess. I don't know what you need 1,000. One bottle of baby oil goes a long way. I don't know what you need.
Remember when they were essentially trying to say that, you know, the baby oil was toxic, that it had drugs in them and it was being used to drug people, and none of that came out. Like, Diddy's case was literally a freak show. Literally a freak show.
You need 1,000 for. I mean, he has a big house. He buys in bulk. You know, I think they have Costco's in every place where he has a home. I mean, have you sat in a parking lot of a Costco and see what people walk out of there with?
Not 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
I don't think it was 1,000. I think it was. Let's just say it's a lot. Okay.
Has he lost his mind? That's from our friends over at TMZ. Back to Tisa Tell standing out in front of the courthouse. Who ever knew that baby oil would be the centerpiece of both the defense and the state's case? But that's Agnifilo. He couldn't even hold up to softball questions from Harvey Levin on TMZ. So I'm very curious why he didn't have Tenny Garagos or Brian Steele do closings.
It was such an interesting choice, but I got to be honest with you, I am salivating at seeing Mark Agnifilo do his baby oil defense. Everybody remembers that TMZ interview. He's sitting there across from Harvey.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.